You are probably wondering what kind of crazy person decided to pour a 70 square meters of concrete slab in a foundation trench. Good question. And in this video I'll explain it in detail. But before I get into the reasons why, let me show you how I did it. Early in the morning, the excavator dumped several centimeters of sand into my trench and leveled it by eye. A few days earlier, the surveyor marked the axes of my walls on the batterboards. To those points, I added an extra 40 centimeters to the outside, just to make sure the concrete slab would be under the entire surface of the house, especially beneath the foundation footings. In the corners of the trench, I drove stakes marking the corners of the slab. Then I stretched out a measuring tape to check the dimensions. They didn't have to be perfect. There was a few centimeters margin, but the slab was designed to be 15 centimeters wider than the foundation footings that would sit on it. This gave me some flexibility in the execution. I leveled the corner stakes using a laser, trying to keep everything at the correct level without too much stress. Once the stakes were set, I screwed in some screws and stretched a string to see if there was too much sand. It turned out that in few spots there was indeed too much, so I grabbed a shovel and leveled it out, especially around the edges, so the formwork could be placed. The plan was to pour 5 centimeters of concrete. I prepared small stakes to support the formwork and started screwing in wooden boards around the perimeter of the trench. I use a long level and a laser to set the height and every meter saw. I drove a stake into the ground to ensure the pressure from the concrete wouldn't deform the formwork. The formwork didn't need to be perfectly straight, since the edges would eventually be covered with soil. This precision was mainly to ensure the concrete would sit evenly under the foundation footings. In a previous video, I mentioned a mistake I made when setting up the laser while the excavator was digging the trench. The laser was passing directly over the butterboard, preventing me from checking the depth of the trench. I had to fix that now, manually removing the excess sand. There will be more shovel work for me during this build. I think all this shoveling has earned me a sub and a thumb up. The sand bed was uneven, so I decided to smooth it out a bit. I made a temporary tool from some boards, which allowed me to scrape off excess sand. It wasn't perfect, but it worked well enough for my needs. Unfortunately, I got caught in the rain during the work, but by the evening I managed to finish the formwork. Looking at the result, I was pretty happy. For a day's work by someone who's never done this before, it turned out quite well. Okay, day 2 completed. It didn't end up how I would like to finish today. So I have the formwork for my first layer of concrete on the ground, but unfortunately I got rain and the sand is wet, so I cannot compact it. I need to wait. Unfortunately also the sand is taking the moisture from the ground, so I don't know if I will be able to compact it tomorrow, so then I would have to wait. And this is how it looks like. I was able to compact a little bit, but not too much, so hoping for better tomorrow. The next day, with the sun blazing, I made a small shopping trip. I bought aluminium profiles and bags of concrete, which would later help me level the slab. How? You will see soon enough. I knew that if I did this well, it would make the upcoming stages of construction much easier. Unfortunately, the compactor didn't work as expected. The sand was too wet, and the machine just sank into it. My dad told me not to worry, that the concrete would level everything out, but I wanted to do it my way. so I started compacting it manually. I built a simple tamper from boards and a concrete block. It may not be a professional tool, but it did the job. I was walking back and forth, tamping down the sand. Every now and then I had to make small adjustments. And so I kept going from one side to the other. In general, I'm building this house because I've always dreamed of doing it on my own. I enjoy physical activity and hard work, so I don't mind the extra effort. People pay for gym membership to lift weights, but here I can make my own gym for free. My homemade tool needed occasional tweaks, which was a bit annoying, but I didn't have much left to do. Well, except my back was starting to hurt, so I made an improvement. I shortened the arms of the tool and the work went a lot easier from there. Thank God, finally the end. And here's my trick for leveling. Yeah, it works, more or less. As you can probably see, the sand bed didn't come out perfectly even. But I'm not stressing over it. The top of the formwork is level and the rest will be leveled out by the concrete, as my dad always says. Am I a frog? Speaking of concrete, how much should I order? I know the length and width, but what the depth? That's the question. I screwed in the screws, stretched string across the trench, and used a measuring tape to check how thick the concrete would be. There was a small slip up. It turned out more uneven than I thought, with the depth varying between 5 and 12 centimeters. For calculating the amount of concrete, I took an average of 9 centimeters. Whatever I do, I like to think ahead. So I'm already preparing conduits for the water pipes. There will be a main line from the municipal water supply, one line going to the garage, and another pipe returning from the deep well. I mark where the main water entry will be and laid down a 160 mm sewage pipe. Just to clarify, the sewage pipe is only there to protect the actual water pipe and allow for an easy pass under the foundation footings. I sealed the ends of the pipe with bags to prevent sand and concrete from getting inside. At the same time, gave it slight slope outward to keep groundwater from entering the building. The final step was to cover it with sand and compact it with water. The water helped the sand settle better, filling in all the empty spaces.
Dobry.
Here's the water outlet to the garage and the water inlet from the well, which will be used for watering the lawn and vegetables. I will have to repeat all these steps twice more. Now, for the answer to the question from the beginning of the video. Why did I put a concrete slab over the entire house area? I choose to go with a floor over a ventilated crawl space, so that in the future I can easily modify installations and comfortably move around under the floor. I'm building this house with expansion in mind, so that this small house can eventually become a real home. To make that transformation easier, my installations need to be designed flexible. In typical solution like this, the ground underneath is usually just soil or sand, but I opted for lean concrete to make it easier to move around in the crawl space. I don't want to be crawling through dust and dirt. The floor framing will rest on the foundation walls, and I will leave about 1.7 meters of free space between the framing and the concrete. This will give me enough room to easily run all the necessary installations. I know this approach is unconventional, but I think it will work perfectly in my case. Under the concrete slab, I plan to lay a vapor barrier to separate the space from ground moisture. As I showed you in the previous video, the groundwater level is quite close to my slab. So this was an important thing for me. I taped the joints to prevent the wind from lifting the film. That was a rather windy day. I ordered 2 rolls of PVC foil. One wasn't big enough, at least according to the manufacturer's specifications. It turned out that it was actually larger, and 1 roll would have been sufficient. But since I already had the extra, I laid down a second layer. Today is not the best day for me to work. I wake up with eyes hurting me. After the breakfast I got some strange things happening to me with my stomach, and it was rain in the morning, so my excavation is full of water. On Friday I was testing one way or to level the concrete, and I came up with this idea of having aluminum profiles laid on the concrete, and this is how it is. Quite nice. And like this. Very good. It works. I will do the same everywhere. After overnight rainfall, I found that my vapor barrier an additional benefit. It created the perfect bottom for a pool, which filled up with water. At first, I tried scooping it out with a bucket, but I quickly realized that was pointless. I waved that bucket around and thought about other ways to solve the problem. What made me happy were my old Gore-Tex mountain boots, which kept the water out of my foot and worked as well as rubber boots. There were some old curbs lying around the side, and when laid flat, they stood a few centimeters above the water level. That was the solution I was looking for. Once the water issue was resolved, I could lay down the profiles and prepare everything for the concrete. I used metal shears to cut the profiles so as not to damage the galvanized coating, because then they could rust. You should never cut aluminum profiles with a grinder. Cutting with the disc burns off the galvanized layer, and the profiles can corrodate at cut points. And those profiles will stay in the concrete forever, so I would prefer they don't rust. In the places where a few millimeters of water still remained on foil, I use a concrete mix without any water. The concrete absorbed the water and set. Since I had the water handy, I put it to good use. I leveled everything with a laser and a level. The strings were only to guide me in the layout of the aluminum profiles, not their level. The aluminum profiles couldn't be spaced more than 2 meters apart because my level for the concrete was 2.5 meters long. The idea was that one side would rest on the aluminum profile and the other on the form board. Where the water was too high, I broke the curb and prepared a dry base for the profile. After a whole day of work, the profiles for leveling the concrete were ready. It was time to pour the concrete slab. And today we are pouring the concrete. I'm waiting for the contractors and for the concrete. So let's see. My dad advised me to hire a team to help us. Doing it alone might be overwhelming and the results wouldn't have been the best. I took his advice and it was the right decision because pouring concrete turned out to be much harder than I expected. When the concrete truck arrived, the team was late. I had never used a concrete pump before. I couldn't resist starting on my own. As you can see, there was water in the excavation, but I figured the concrete would push it out. The idea was generally good, but I should have started pouring in the area with the water so it would have been displaced properly. I wasn't sure how much concrete to pour or exactly how to go about it, so I improvised and gained my first experience. In some places I poured too much and in others too little. It didn't go as smoothly as it should have. I tried to level the concrete as I went. The profiles worked well, but the concrete itself was too runny. It wasn't just about the water in the excavation. The concrete mix itself was too watery. I learned that later from the team and from future experience when pouring the foundation footings. The team finally arrived, and I was already halfway through the job. They helped me finish pouring the concrete, which was a huge relief, because the pace needed to be fast with that much concrete. The mixer truck was delivering the mix, and we were trying to keep everything under control. The concrete pump was invaluable. I can't imagine how it would have gone without it. The hardest part was leveling the concrete. It seemed like a straightforward task, but it required a lot of strength and precision to get everything even. I helped the team as much as I could, spreading the concrete and making sure the aluminum profiles stay in place, as they were essential for ensuring perfect flatness. Fortunately, with good organization, we managed to get everything done efficiently and the concrete slab looked pretty good. Of course, it wasn't perfect. There were some minimal level differences, but that wasn't the big problem. I expected that I would be able to level it out in the next stages. In the end, the difference between the lowest and the highest point didn't exceed 6 mm, which I consider as a great result. It's worth mentioning that for projects like this, it's really helpful to have extra hands, especially when you are pouring larger areas. Doing it alone would have been hard and extremely time-consuming. When the concrete started to set, I have to admit, I felt a huge sense of satisfaction. It's another big step in building my dream house. Each stage like this brings me closer to the moment when I can finally start putting up the first walls. At this point, the most important thing was the concrete to set evenly and not crack. Of course, there's still a lot of work ahead, but seeing the finished slab gives me the motivation to keep going. To sum up, was this concrete slab necessary? Maybe not in every case, but for my project, my style of building and my peace of mind, absolutely. Plus, I'm now confident that I have a solid foundation on which to build the next parts of the house. The concrete is on the place. The first layer is done. It turned out I ordered too much concrete. It was hard to estimate the right amount on uneven ground. I've always believed it's better to order more than risk running out. Well, we didn't run out. However, the result was that the sides of the excavation were filled with concrete. And I left it like that for a few weeks. That was a mistake. And I will pay the price later. That day it was supposed to be very hot. I didn't want the concrete to crack too much or set too quickly. so I covered the whole thing with foil. The task was challenging since I was alone and strong wind was blowing, but it was a good move. Thank you for watching my construction adventures. More stages are ahead, so don't miss the next video, where I will be showing how I move forward with the foundation and first walls. Take care and see you in the next episode.